Hello, Silas here. I'm on my way to Hillsong Church, meeting a friend of mine there. I met her at a philosophy group about a year back, and she's still religious. And for me, philosophy kind of provided me an ability to really let go of my theology, my theism. I was raised Christian, but I left that because I found more pertinent, more better ways to organize my life and make sense of the world through philosophy. But heading there to check it out and see what she gets from there, see what other people get from there. Was on that video about evolution, the last video I released about how somebody mentioned there how science itself, the scientific method, actually comes from philosophy. And somebody said something, some of the time somebody had discussed maybe that religion itself was a precursor to the philosophical method. Well, anyway, I want to check out how this Hillsong thing goes. Walking by Madison Square Garden. And this is another thing. For other people, a venue like this, sports, that might be some kind of religious experience for some people. Seems to people build these massive arenas. And in the future, will churches be the ones that are remembered? Or will stadiums like this? Anyway, so shall go into the video about my experience at Hillsong and some other things about religion and the like. Alright, bye.
So that was quite the experience. It was a rather good experience actually. I'm definitely glad I went. Glad I got the invite. Glad I accompanied my friend. And that the name of the place, Hillsong, is rather appropriate. Just the venue itself, massive area. We were on a balcony, so it was like actually being on a hill. And then the song part of it, you get in and it opens up with different kinds of songs and different genres, and it's kind of like a concert atmosphere. And that's one thing I was kind of thinking immediately. When was the last time you sang the loudest that you possibly can? There's karaoke, there's things like that, but just to have that environment where you can go there and just sing at the top of your lungs and dance and enjoy the time with your friends. And it was a rather wholesome experience when it comes to that aspect. And for that, I definitely can't hold it against them. I enjoyed that aspect of it and looked down and saw the people around and saw that people were getting something out of it. I didn't get the same things that I think most people were getting out of it, but I think this is a common thing with services such as this, with religion and with theology and with different things like this. With these group kind of events, people go for different reasons, and yeah, it was great for at least for that. Well, before I get into, or I'll just mix this in with the analysis of what happened. I'm just going to give some thoughts on the general atmosphere. And one thing that constantly was thinking about with this, I mentioned in the evolution video, the religion bashing that was involved in that science kind of talk, that science discussion. And I wanted to be specific that religion itself is not just across the board the same thing. As I've mentioned, I think statism, the worship of the state, is a religion. So now, when you even take that away, the secular religions, and you go to just the theologies, even all the theologies are not equal across the board. Now, a big difference with this was more, I think, a youthful place. I didn't see that many old people. I think people in their 40s might have been the oldest people there, if there were even that many of them there. I felt like I was one of the oldest people there, and I'm like 33. So there was that environment there, and the preachers and the pastors and the people singing and the people on stage, they seemed to be rather younger too. They were dressed in more contemporary dress. As you can see with the music that was being played, it was different genres, instruments were being played. I'd been to a similar environment like this by going to some Korean evangelical churches back when I was in high school. But this was to another level, and they were introducing a few concerts coming up and these albums, and just a general cheeriness was there. You're thinking about it, actually were some more families, so there must have been some people probably in their 50s because they seem to have teenager, older kids. There were some people with really young kids who I think it was like a 2-year-old or something. I don't know if I would have my 2-year-old in such a loud venue. And there was the way people were dressed. Some people looked like they just come from working out. Some people were dressed more smartly or more formally. So it was just an interesting mix of things. And of course, as with most Christianity, there wasn't gender segregation in the congregation. Now, raised Christian, lived in more of a Christian countries, and that's another thing with Christian countries. The reason I was against the religion bashing, just a general saying, oh, religion was against this, religion was against that, religion was for this, when we were discussing evolution and the struggles that some scientists had with certain material, is that no matter what you say, these sciences and certain fields, certain technologies, certain advances in humanity have come under Christian nations, under Christian countries, under Christian cultures. Why haven't these also developed under animism, under Buddhism to the same extent, under Islam to the same extent? So there is something about Christianity that has allowed for or has enabled this to happen more than in other religions. Now, this could be due to the people living there, due to other aspects of it, but in that sense, we can't say Christianity is just the same as any other religion. And why I bring up this point, and I think it's actually a salient point to bring up, is because this argument is often made for government. They normally say that, oh, like, yeah, you say government is anti science, but if they slash the budget on this, who is going to actually develop this form of science? Well, no, science has been as hampered by government as religion. And this should not be surprising. Statism is a religion. So if you apply the reasoning that says the leaders in Christianity stood against X form of science, that also applies to the state even more so. What the leaders in the state at any given time want will also shape what happens in the field of science. For example, right now, climate change. If they fund that in a certain way, it's going to be funneled towards a certain direction. At least most of the attention will go to a certain direction. And another point worth mentioning is the fact that you can have this sort of contemporary concert celebration of Jehovah, of the Christian God, and then go a few blocks away to St. Peter's and have your more traditional Latin Catholic Mass. So you have those two kind of things existing at the same time without any direct drive to wipe out the other faction. Now, this is different with Islam when you have something like the Sunni versus the Shia sects of the religion. In their holy book, in the Quran, it's indicated that you should persecute not just the infidels, the non believers, but you also persecute the other sects of the religion that aren't worshipping in the right way. So now, who gets to decide who is worshipping in the right way? That's probably the person with the most strength, with the most power, and then they get to persecute the others. So, although you can't completely discount the effect that Western influence and involvement in the Middle East has had on the violence that goes on there, this this aspect of the religion has been a big driving part of that. I just saw an article, I think yesterday, that stated that people high in the US government still don't understand the difference between the Shia and the Sunni Muslims. And this started a while back. I think even back in the Gulf War, somebody stated that it was unfortunate that even though they knew how to dismantle the military there, they knew how to dismantle, take out the actual, I think it was Saddam Hussein in that situation, they still had no understanding of what the internal dynamics were within the religions. And that might have been a situation to assume that, oh, it's like Lutherans versus Catholics, so we just go in there. They still kind of think they're worshiping the same God. As long as they have their different churches, their different venues to do it, there's not going to be that much of an issue between them. But no, once you get the once you get the despot out there, once you get Saddam out there, these people take their sides on their religious lines and set off to war off that basis. Now I'm going to get back to the topic. So at Hillsong, the main sermon was about the conversion of Saul, which is Acts chapter 9, verses 1 to I think 12 or 13. It was just a story of Saul who was converted from a Pharisee into a Christian into the Apostle Paul, or is it? Yeah. So the general theme of that was "I want to see again," which is what the pastor. I think he was a pastor that told us this. I'm just saying, I think it was a pastor. I think I'm so used to just seeing pastors wearing the pastor's robes. This guy was kind of dressed in some cowboy type boots, some jeans, and just a leather jacket, and he was just personable. So I can get that. I can see the appeal this would have to the younger crowd and to the people that were there. Okay, so here are the three takeaways. The first was your excuses outweigh your expectations. The second was your negative talk outweighs your positive talk. The third was you tear people down more than you build people up. Now, these 3 points, if you just take away the God aspect, the Jesus aspect, they make sense. And to me, these things make sense. And that's why I do understand that theologies do have a purpose. There is actual purpose and people get things out of it. Now, when I hear something like this, I seriously sit there and I wonder, if I could come out here and just convince everybody that God doesn't exist, that Jesus is just a person if he existed, and the definition they have of the entity that they're worshiping is a squared circle, is something that cannot exist. What's the point of that? If these 3 points are tied in to that belief, how harmful is it? Are they out there legislating their beliefs onto me, or are they just living their lives with these as some central parts in it? Now, would I prefer somebody found this from philosophy and from some other rational, more rational form? Yes, I would prefer that. But would I prefer somebody didn't have this and was just wandering around the world trying to figure out things in other ways? Not quite sure. Another part that I really liked was the things they cheered. You know, okay, they said it was Father's Day next weekend and or coming up, and the cheers I don't think weren't as hype as they were in for a few other things that had been mentioned before that. And I have a feeling that if they said it was Mother's Day, the cheers would be a lot more. So it's kind of interesting to see. I mean, it's a gynocentric society, so it's not too unexpected to see that Father's Day is a little lower. But they were cheering things like marriage or cheering things like this. And privilege came up, but in a good way. At least here. They said Christians have the privilege to build people's lives up. And you see, that's a key thing. And I think this is something that I've noticed in a lot of Christian communities. Now, this, of course, isn't all Christians, isn't all the time. I mean, there was a time when there was the Spanish Inquisition, which, this is what I'm saying. When a terrorist attack occurs, when something happens and somebody is claiming to be Muslim when they do that, and then people come out and say this is not about Islam, this is not about religion, that person isn't really a truly religious person. Think about during the Spanish Inquisition. It wasn't that many people. It was happening in Spain, but that was somehow due to Christianity. Now, if somebody wanted to discuss what about Christianity enabled the Spanish Inquisition to occur, and then somebody's like, oh, those are not real Christians, that's not really about Christianity. I mean, most of the Christians in the world are peaceful right now. They're not putting people on racks and torturing them. No, that's obfuscating the issue. We still need to focus on why is that happening. And to that end, I think I saw an article saying like 50,000 people or a lot of people were out in some farm in the UK apparently protesting against the attacks that had happened, the terrorism that had happened. So is there a chance for Islam to actually have a reformation? Possibly. I hope there is. I hope we have the time to do that. But I don't think it's going to happen if we try to pretend that terrorism is not part of or is not allowed, if not directly instructed in their holy book. And this is one thing I was telling one of my friends after we left. They were talking about how pretty much all religions are the same. They can't really say one is right and one is wrong. But it was like, no, Christianity in and of itself, in my opinion, and from my observations, is better or is more peaceful, or for someone who is an atheist, who is a non-believer, from all the religions that I know of, it's one of the most preferential one to live under if that's the majority religion of most of the people in the community, in the country that you're living in. things that do take me out of these environments or these experiences when some things are being told. There's some things that don't necessarily follow, or they'll be telling a story, and you can kind of tell that they're telling this story to somehow tie the religion into it or to tie some scripture into it. And from my observation, scripture, it's a faith based thing. It's not, by definition, it doesn't need to depend on following logical steps. I mean, it could just have some conjecture, it could just jump from one point to another. And they're bringing out certain points, like talking about sins of children. But when they talk about sins of children, they're talking about more just the simple lies here and there. Like they take something they want, they don't really understand property rights at that point to the extent as an adult would, and they're not held as responsible. But then when they mention sins of a child, and then they later on say the wages of sin are death, and they don't really make. I mean, but I guess everybody, most of the people there are believers, so they understand there's different levels of sin. But to me, that kind of makes me somewhat uncomfortable. Then there is the time, or pretty much any time they mention God or soul without actually bothering to define what that is. That takes me out as well. But then they go back and they said this one thing where they say, who do we see as a potential enemy that could be an ally? And that was part of why I was going to this thing. I'm going to this thing to understand, look, you can't just be all anti-theist across the board. In some situations, there are some issues that they may be allies in religion. They may be allies who don't believe quite what you believe. If we can agree on 95% of things, this is the analogy I'm thinking of. If you get home or if you get to a location and you see a house is burning, and you think, I need to stop this house burning because it's my home. Somebody else thinks, I need to stop this house burning because God asked me to. Should I sit there and argue with this person and say, oh, look, God didn't really ask you to stop this house from burning? Or should I just accept that person's help to stop the house from burning? And then after that, we can talk about it. Maybe he starts saying, oh, yeah, God sent me to do this. And I'm sitting there thanking the person, and I'm trying to convince him that, look, I'm thanking you for this. It's not God that sent you here, but I thank you. You're the one who's responsible. You're the one who made the decision to take your energy and actually help me this. The decisions you made in your life are the ones that brought you to this point to be a good enough person to decide to take the time to help me to stop my house from burning. So that's kind of how I'm thinking of in some of these situations. There's no need for me to go out there and convince everybody in this Hillsong location that God doesn't exist. Because I look at the positive things that they're doing, I look at the potential harm that they're doing, and the positives far outweigh any of the harm that's going on that I noticed in that place. Even after the service, they're giving out free Bibles, they're talking to people. They just had a whole lot of people who would just stand around and sit around there and just talk and just converse. And I've had that experience without the theology. I've had that experience with just joining meetups, meeting friends, where we just hang out together and we just discuss things. We have WhatsApp groups, we have different groups on social media, and we just commune in a way without the theology part of it. Some people in these groups that I have are believe in certain theologies, in certain gods. And even though I don't, and occasionally it comes up and I just have some questions about it, but in general, the things we are discussing are pertinent to all of us. They're still important. They still help us in our day-to-day lives. We can still relate to these things and benefit from each other's company. So now if you're doing that while occasionally listening to pretty exciting music and, I don't really believe the stuff that they're saying, but it's still getting into you. You can still feel the hype. You can feel it moving around you. You can feel the energy that was going on and the general positive energy. It's about that goes to the whole woo, wishy-washy type fantasy feels thing. But yeah, it felt wholesome. And, it felt like it was just a group of people coming together to enjoy each other's company, enjoy an event without any negative experiences out there. And it being religious made me think of how disturbing it must have been to be at that Ariana Grande concert, which just happened on May 22nd, the attack that happened there. And just think, those people were also there just enjoying some music, just enjoying some time, and then to have something so violent happen. Here, I don't know if this is a regular thing, but there was security, they were doing the checking bags, they were doing metal detectors and people coming in. But I felt that there was no possibility, or I wasn't thinking there was a chance of violence breaking out in this place. That must have been a similar thing that was happening in the Ariana Grande place. Somebody mentioned that there wasn't that much security at that concert, but I don't know that. But that feeling of security, that feeling of just being able to be oneself, to just let it out, that's what I got from a lot of people there. You could see people were just praising, they were just had their hands up in the air. And I'm thinking, is there ever going to be a time when people will be doing this? And could you have like a concert about genetics or mechanical engineering or philosophy where you have this kind of environment where people are singing philosophical songs or discussing scientific theorems in this kind of jovial, excited manner? And I'm not sure. There might be some ways to do this, but I don't know if it's something that just doesn't lend itself to this kind of environment. But yeah, it was all in all a good time. So I'm going to go back one more time. There was a specific pastor that my friend suggested I should listen to, who I'm actually going to try and go and see what they have to say. I would also like to attend a sporting event soon because I think the general atmosphere at this place I think was similar. I was walking by Madison Square Garden before and after this place, and I was thinking, how much similar is this to that? Because when you have those kind of events where you have a whole group of people yelling, chanting, that the group dynamics that go on, I think there's an energy that kind of carries people around when we all know you're kind of there for the same reason. You may have come from different places for different reasons. You're going to depart to the different locations. But at that time, you're here with a group of people with a generally similar focus on why you're there and what you're doing and the enjoyment that you're getting out of the situation. So it's not a completely alien environment. There's a reason religions and things like that have developed in humanity because this is something that humans enjoy and get some benefit out of. One more thing I'd like to mention is the professionality that was there. I mean, you could tell that a lot goes into setting this up and to running this. And it's rather amazing that they have a service. I think this was a 7:30 service, so they have, I think, five on Sundays. They might have some other ones during the week too. But you could tell there was actually a lot of effort going into getting this going. They had like the music would go up and down, it would kind of move you through this journey throughout the whole service. And I mean, that's part of it. That's part of, I don't want to say the magic, but that's part of the appeal and getting people in and interested and coming back. I feel tempted to say disingenuous here, but I don't know if it's necessarily disingenuous, just how if you go to a basketball game, they put in aspects and beats, and you watch a TV show, there's a story being told, and they get you to be interested to come back. They don't want to sell you something, but they want to impart something to you. Well, actually, they do also want to sell you something. Now, in this case, is selling you salvation better than selling you season tickets to a basketball team? So, I think that's it. I'm going to wind down here. If you are religious in the sense of you follow the theology, let me know your thoughts on this. If you've been to this kind of evangelical singing kind of churches, let me know what you think about them. If you've been to Hillsong, any of the Hillsongs, it's a massive church. There's a lot of different ones in the New York area and all over the world. If you've been to those, let me know. It was a really personable situation. I think everybody was really happy and at least seemed happy. But yeah, it was interesting experience. Thanks for listening to the video. Like, share, and subscribe. Of course, please leave your comments in the section below, the comment section. Until next time, bye.